Bob, do you think that if they had stayed at that plateau doing that kind of music, that in itself would have been quite an accomplishment for a band?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I mean, I think if I had to pick what my favorite phase is, I think it's the early phase. That doesn't mean I'd want to get rid of any of the others or that I don't enjoy them all. But, boy, that was a wonderful, raw, sophisticated rock and roll band. I mean, I like raw, sophisticated rock and roll bands a lot. And so did Lennon. I mean, Lennon was the real rock and roller in that group more than any of the others.
I guess it was the tension between the two leaders, McCartney and Lennon, I guess, that gave them the sound they had.
Well, of course, it made for the harmonies. I mean, Lennon always had a much harsher voice. His guitar style was, he was of the three people who played stringed instruments, he was the least technically proficient, although I actually think he was the most interesting. No, not to gainsay McCartney's bass playing, which really was, I think, what gave the group its melodic and harmonic appeal on a compositional level. But it was Lennon was the one who was committed, and he was committed to that feeling. You see, he was committed to that kind of adolescent anger, which he really retained in one way or another for the whole first phase. Even when he was doing arty stuff, it always had an edge to it. It's the work of a man who's never been satisfied. The music was remarkable, and especially the vocal presence of the music, I think. There was a sense of hope, anger, energy in that music that, well, there's never been anything like it. Now, you want to talk image? Yeah, they had an image, right? They were dressed up by Brian Epstein to be cute, and yet there was clearly a lot of irresponsibility and mischievousness and a little menace, too, underneath all the cuteness. I think A Hard Day's Night really served to imprint that on people's mind, the first film they made with Richard Lester. Mm-hmm. They were also always, in interviews, they were always outspoken and bright in a way pop stars had never been before. And also, I mean, as far as the North American impact is concerned, the appeal of the exotic should not be underplayed. They were English, and ever since then, there's been certain English bands which have made much bigger impact here because they were English than they did in England itself.
At a certain point, they seemed to take more command of what they were doing and reveal themselves to be much more depth. A more delicate touch to the humor.
Oh yes,
to the music. And at what point did that happen?
Well, I would say that happened sometime in '65 and became completely apparent by the time of Rubber Soul. Yeah. But once again, Lennon had already published 2 books by 1964. They were based on Edward Lear. It really hold up. I was looking at them last night while I was writing my piece. These books really hold up in his own right, and A Spaniard in the Works. This was not a man who discovered jokes.
No,
as he understood what he could do with his career, and it seems to me that there was always an implicit humor in that music, just in the way they backed each other up. Now, as far as far out kind of jokes, that began to happen, say, in '66. Songs like Day Tripper,
the Revolver album in that era.
Yeah. And by August '66, you got Yellow Submarine, which is a complete goof, and doesn't really sound like rock and roll, etc.
Okay, what are we going to hear next, Bob?
I'd like to play something from Rubber Soul. It's a nasty song, very nasty. It expresses that anger I was talking about, and says a lot about what happened to him later, I think. It's called Run for Your Life.